Mr. Bogus Handzel, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, Mr. Jingle. It's been a long time.
It has been indeed longer than I'd cared to admit, but before we jump into anything all that serious, I kind of want to know this first. What's one thing that you should trust, but you just can't find yourself to actually take that trust in a thing that is mostly unassuming that most people have no problems with?
Roller coasters.
All right. I mean, that's a little severe. I mean, I guess that's more valid because there has been actual instances where things have gone wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always been afraid of roller coasters since I was young. My mom claims that there was a boy on our block when I was just a few years old that would like to push me in my stroller. And once he pushed me too fast, and ever since then, I'd been afraid of heights and speed. The speed thing's obviously gone away since I'm super into cars and doing high performance driving events and stuff like that. But the fear of heights still exists. And I don't think I've been on a roller coaster since I've probably been like 10 years old. And even then, I'm pretty sure I cried when that happened. So fear of roller coasters, which most people don't have a problem with. They trust that.
I don't know. I'm with you. I feel like it sometimes could be just an unnecessary risk. I mean, like, what are we doing here? Like, I really need that 45 seconds of excitement in my life that
It's
I,
the,
you know,
yeah, it's the hook of the adrenaline. Once you get it, sometimes it's tough for people to give up, right?
is it the combination of the speed and the heights coming into play at the same time that you might be taking the biggest issue with?
I think for me it's heights. I think heights has always been
All
kind of
right,
like a
just
worry.
heights.
Yeah.
Well, for me, mine is much less life threatening, but for whatever reason, I can't seem to trust the ice cream truck. It feels like just such a strange occurrence to me. A dude driving around with food in a car that you have no verification of, and I don't like it. And usually my kids are involved, and I kind of want to ask for like some sort of certification from like the county commissioner. I don't know.
That is a health code been obliged
Yeah,
by? Has
I
it been
don't.
recently checked? Yeah, I mean it's an interesting. I mean it's summer now. It's getting hot in Chicago, so I'd love to have some ice cream. But it's one of those things where, I mean, it's an interesting business model. I'm really curious to see how much ice cream you got to push to really make a good living out
Um,
of that. But
I mean, it might come back to the whole "don't take candy from strangers" thing that was like berated into us, as children. But I mean, yeah, just the idea of like I'm just going to drive and hope somebody's outside for me to sell to. I mean, it is very strange. But let's move on to something maybe a little more relevant in terms of. I don't want to say that you maybe necessarily fit this mold, but you are a person that I don't want to say doesn't trust things in your agency, but you're always looking for ways to make sure that you guys know what's going on and that you are trusted and have the right things in place. What does that look like in your agency in terms of how do you approach making sure that you guys are always kind of doing the right thing?
are you talking about from as an agency perspective or from a management's perspective? Because I think that's two very
Uh,
different questions, right?
let's go the operations route.
Operations route. I think it's one of those things where I'm always in a position to try to improve a process. And you've known me long enough for the fact that sometimes I get, stuck on things because I feel like they haven't reached that necessary level of readiness for me to release them. And then I just kind of overthink, and it just doesn't end up going anywhere. Where 90% of the people out there would be perfectly fine with what they've already come up with at that point. But even now, as the agency has gone through so many changes in the last 5 years, I still hear things that we're constantly adjusting. And those are simple items like the way that we talk to customers on renewal calls, or the way that we email clients, the verbiage in those emails. Whenever I see it and whenever I hear the reaction between either the client base or my service team base, I've tried to always find small little areas of improvement to kind of keep that ever evolving to hopefully get to that final form. But it's a job that's never done. And my office is strategically positioned within the building where acoustically I basically can hear every single corner. So I can hear conversations and know exactly what needs to be addressed quickly to kind of make sure that that doesn't happen again in the future. Just constant betterment of all the processes.
I mean, office position could be some sort of indicator of trust factor overall, but I mean that's an interesting dynamic you have there. Well, so I guess in terms of of getting over that fear of releasing things before they're ready. Have you made progress in that? Is that something that you feel maybe, well, better question. Do you think it's actually served you well in some cases, or has it, maybe hindered your progress?
It's definitely there's definitely been a huge benefit. With that transition phase came obviously ownership from, my father to my brother and I in the agency, and plus, on top of that, we're looking at tenured employees that have been with us between, our longest term employees are 31 years, so employee number two at the agency. The next one's 28 years, so there is a huge mind shift of the way that they're doing operations. So I think when we started changing everything and really changing the team, we had buy-in. We had people that just couldn't see the new vision, that unfortunately we had to part ways because it just didn't work out. And then we had new people come in that were referred by current employees, which is the best sort of referral for new employees. And we just have a good team now where that trust exists mutually, where I can push things off or get things to a certain point and then have someone else to finish out the details and put that into motion. So that's been a huge improvement as to where we were a bunch of years back, where now I'm not the only one doing it. My brother Lucas isn't the only one doing it, but now we have a whole organizational team that works together to meet the goals of the agency.
Yeah, I mean, so all right, let's dive into that process a little bit of sort of sifting through making that transition, having to deal with people that, probably saw you running around the office as a little kid in some way, shape, or form, and now you're sort of in the seat of like, like you said, ownership and sort of guiding the direction and vision. How did you sort of handle that? And like you said, like some people necessarily didn't come on board, but that can be a difficult time to sort of have to sort of have those conversations with those people.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult time for me. It was the hardest because it's something that I've always, like you said, I grew up in the agency. I was running around at the age of 5, putting files in, and people were picking at store or grabbing me hot dogs from the corner hot dog place when our office was a little bit more in the city. It's a level of proving yourself to them. In some instances, on the people that you part ways, is I always did everything I could to make sure that that transition included everybody that we had before the ownership change and the change of the processes and the systems. I wanted to include everybody and say, hey, we're thankful for all the years you've put into the business to make us as successful as we are today. This is what our next vision is for the next 30 years. Let's see what we can do to, move forward, and constantly have those follow-up conversations to kind of, see what it goes. But that change was hard because you start seeing those ingrained tendencies of people that have just been stuck in a single set mind, of the way that they do things. And there were just, some breakups that were unfortunate, but it was definitely hard. And I think I took it personally, just because of the level of having to prove yourself, and you build relationships with these people for so many years. You hate to see those kind of, break away, unfortunately.
What's the one thing that you would either do differently or maybe tell somebody else to look out for if either they're one about to come into that position where they're going to be taking ownership in the agency and they have some of these decisions or conversations to have, and or maybe somebody that has already done it and it's just lingering and it's a problem, right? And it's something that they constantly think about. Is there something that you would sort of look back on and say, boy, pay attention to this, don't do that?
It's tough to say there's something specific to focus on because every agency operates differently. For me personally, where I see where issues kind of come up or turn in, let's say things evolve into issues unnecessarily, is on the side for me of lack of communication, where I think it might be a small issue at that time, but then I notice that same issue maybe 3 or 4 times and I still don't, bring it up and have that discussion, and then it turns into a bigger issue at that point. But that's a personal issue with me, where I sometimes have trouble communicating as clearly as I'd like to make sure that both parties understand. And then when you're having a conversation like that with a team member, it's super tough to also make sure that they'll understand the way that you want them to. So it's the conversation, it's the follow up, it's making sure that things are improving. And sometimes on my side, with all the changes going on, before I had the team that I have now, where I can delegate things, it was kind of tough to tackle all that at once. And the things that fall off were those important conversations, unfortunately, in those situations. So for me, it'd probably be, make sure that you're communicating with all parties involved to make sure that the vision is the same and no one's being left behind in that.
I guess we've talked a lot about the internal focus on what kind of had to be done, but like externally, like what did clients see? What was the thing that maybe stood out that was you and Lucas's sort of primary objective? Like if we're going to change one thing like right away, what is that thing that we think needs really to kind of go first, and what is that, I guess, message out to the, to everybody that you do business with?
Rebranding is a huge thing for us. We updated our logo about 6 years ago. First change was website mindset. Clear goals for what the agency wants to be, the vision, then getting the right team in place. And last year, we were hoping to really kind of focus on brand image. Kind of COVID kind of put a little hiccup on that because you weren't able to kind of be everywhere you wanted to be. All the events were canceled and stuff like that. But that's a huge focus for us this year, and the team's on board, making sure that we're moving in the right direction. We actually, today is our first day. We just hired someone for marketing specifically, and that's it's our first day in the office today. So that's a big move for the agency because that's something else that I can now delegate to someone, and she has experience in the Chicagoland area, working for a few large grocery chains in the area, and specifically focusing our niche, which is the Polish community. But it's really brand image and education. You have every agency out there advertising as for price, or every company advertising for price, and we're constantly trying to evolve that conversation to coverages, making sure, because we understand that price at the end of the day is super important, but the knowledge that we're trying to teach our clientele about the coverages that they have and the differences in the product for them to make the right choice for their family, we've really kind of doubled down on that. And we're making sure that our whole team is continuously learning more and more about insurance as a whole so they can answer the difficult questions when they're proposed, and make recommendations on that behalf, and kind of change that. We want to move away where people think that their insurance is Handzel Associates. We're the ones paying the claims. That's kind of a tough mentality change, where that some of the things might get lost in translation, since 90% of our book of business is specifically Polish speaking. It's a little bit different for other agencies, but for us, it's kind of all the work that we put in on the English side. We also have to duplicate on the Polish side, which we've also doubled down on duplicating Ukrainian, Russian, and then soon hopefully Spanish too, because that's the corner of the market that we kind of want to niche in a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that wasn't something that I didn't realize for a long time that was such a big part of your business. And just exactly like you said, 90% of most of the business you do is in Polish, right? That's something that I don't even speak another language, so it doesn't even make sense to me. If you were to, I guess, maybe say something, a benefit of that outside of obviously knowing exactly who you're talking to and how you're talking to them, but is there anything that sort of stands out to you over the years that you're so dedicated to, to not having to dictate how people talk to you? You're going to talk to them the way that they want to talk to you. Is there anything that you would say to other agencies that might not do that yet?
I mean, I think that's kind of a niche. I think that it's hard to be a generalized agent that you do everything. In the '90s, that was much easier. Now with all the different forms of advertising, all the different forms of raising brand awareness for individual agencies, if you don't have a really strong niche for yourself and your agency, you're making it more difficult for yourself to be successful, in my opinion. If I look at our client count, and I look at, based it off of census reports, because that's basically what I can base it off of, the number of households within my local area that have Polish as a language within the household, we've only got 7% of that internally within the agency. So now imagine as we increase that percentage, the size of our book of business, and we do it. And we've also rolled out is that we've also added 5 other states to our book of business where we're writing, and that's specifically targeting, data that we've found out there where we know that our niche community has migrated to. So Florida, Arizona, New York, New Jersey, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana. So, we know where that clientele is and that population is. And we want to just make sure is that they're understanding insurance in whatever language is most comfortable for them, rather than having to be uncertain of what they're signing or what they're purchasing, and constantly being with that client throughout the journey of that financial reassurance.
I don't think I've ever asked you this question, but was part of that vision sort of following that niche, saying like, listen, we can be more than what we are right here, right now, to this small circumference diameter of people?
Yeah. I mean, definitely when we started looking at it, obviously there reaches a point in an agency. I mean, a lot of agencies have been around for a long time, where you feel the necessary need for change. Okay, you might not know what that change might or has to be at that moment, you kind of overanalyze and then reanalyze and kind of figure out which path you're going to go to. So we kind of explored different options, but we really realized about our specific place within the Polish community here in Chicago and all the things that we've done outside, raising money for charity, being at numerous sponsorship events and constantly being involved in the Polish community here in Chicago. We just decided that it doesn't make sense for us to tackle other markets. Let's really focus on what we've been doing good for the last 30 years, and let's roll that out for the next 30 years because, city of Chicago, it's a giant city. We've only got 7% of the market and our book of business is still pretty big, but we want to basically try to eventually expand that throughout other states and really kind of service where it's kind of a great layout for the customers to communicate in the language that they prefer. Because when we made the biggest change over to our new current AMS system, one of the things we want to make sure is that it was easily visible as to any client that calls in. We know right away what language preference they want to be communicated in. So we already know, and then all the communications go in that specific language preference, so on and so forth. So that we want to make sure that they really understand what they're getting rather than getting the typical insurance jargon. And that's also reaching out to our carriers, making sure that our carriers are okay with us translating things and verifying that it's okay for us to send them, because there's a lot of portal issues where clients can't service themselves because they don't understand. So it's constant work in progress, making sure that they're able to function the same way as, let's say, you and I are able to function with technology, in the insurance space for our own personal policies.
So you brought up that transition to the new AMS, and this is one thing I'm curious again of all the stuff that you've overcooked. I doubt that you've undercooked anything, but of all sort of the different projects that you've kind of ushered through the agency, what's maybe the most important one that has happened that you thought like maybe it wasn't on at the top of the list at the time, but ultimately ended up being, and then maybe what was one that you were really excited for, but ultimately had minimal impact on the overall agency's performance?
The one that made the biggest change is I took probably 3 weeks of the first, let's say, quarter of the time that we were starting to process the changes before we changed the AMS system, before we did anything, where I really kind of got down in the weeds of making sure, hey, figuring out what we did is I sat down as a customer service rep and handled the frontline calls for 3 weeks to see the processes that they were handling and doing, because they are the forward-facing representatives of your agency, right? When I saw that, I'd have the data to communicate back to them, hey, this is what I saw. What are you as a team doing in these situations? Where do we need to improve? What needs to change? Where are you going to need help? And then start trying to figure out in those little gaps that I'm seeing where I can use technology to make their lives a lot easier in those situations, which ended up leading to, hey, let's see what we can do in our current AMS system back then. And then noticing that old habits die hard. And then it's like, okay, clean slate, everyone's starting on something new. But it took some time to get to that point where we were going to it took about 2 years of cleaning up data, making sure our processes are the way that we want them right now before making the switch to new AMS system, or pulling that trigger. But, I think that was, the biggest thing that was the first step is really understanding and cleaning the job sites, as Billy Williams liked to say, knowing what was going on from the smallest incident in the agency, and then moving forward from that, because they're the ones picking up the phone calls, they're having those conversations, and then kind of transitioning over. And then after all that was cleaned out, then we focused in on the new business side, how we're onboarding clients, so on and so forth. But we wanted to make sure that during the changes we retain the customers that we currently have, so they don't feel any interruption in that. On the thing that, let's say, made the least amount of impact, I'm not sure. I've never really thought about that, so I don't have an easy answer for you there.
All right, I guess I'll let you off the hook, Bogus. Or wasted the most amount of time. Maybe I'll take that. If there's something that just took a whole bunch of time that you felt like you felt like you wasted a lot of it.
Back and forth conversations between then staff about where we're going and why we're going there. I think that may have been a little bit of time waster. I probably could have kind of cut that off a little bit early. But I'm one of those people that doesn't give up on people easily. So, but then when you kind of after the fact, you kind of take a look at it and say, this is what I probably should have done. This probably made it a little bit better. But if anything, it's the over analyzing of changes that may have slowed things down. But eventually, everything that we've kind of put into play, because that overanalyzation on my side, probably it's turned out pretty well, because I've tried to view all the angles that you can kind of come across there.
All right, Bogus, I got 3 more questions for you. First one, real simply, what's one thing that you hope you never forget?
Honestly, my love for the industry. I think that as I've kind of grown into an agency, becoming, working up from the mailroom to where I am now today, it's an industry that even after I expect, the agency to be around for a long time, but if something were to ever happen, I don't see myself working in a different industry because of the context, the friendships, and the possibility of just improving the industry as a whole, um, being out there. So, that's something that I've kind of fallen in love with, and I don't think that's anything that I'll ever forget, and I hope not to ever forget.
Now, on the other side of that, what's one thing you still have yet to learn?
Every day something new. Lately, we've had, with the weather and the current economic situation, there's all sorts of new claims instances that are kind of coming across. You're diving into those situations, you're learning, you're teaching your team about that. I continuously try to learn something new every day, and that about me. In the agency world, it's tough because there's a lot of shiny objects out there, and you kind of just have to pick the right shiny object to kind of learn more about. But there's nothing really specific that's on the top of my mind right now. I've just kind of gone through a lot of changes in the last 5 years in the agency, and now it's for me it's time to kind of come back and take a look at everything from the beginning and kind of make sure that they're still functioning with all the additional changes that have kind of gone through. So I've actually been focusing on for the next 2 quarters is kind of going back and just double checking everything with the team and making sure that, hey, this is where we are, this is what needs to be done, and hopefully having my team better those changes that we've once implemented. So I think on the learning point, I'm always trying to improve communication. So if it's anything, I'm constantly trying to learn how to communicate better with my team. That's probably the easy answer to that, but nothing specific knowledge wise other than that.
All right, Bogus, last question to you, sir. If I were to hand you a magic wand of sorts to reshape, change, alter, speed up any part of insurance that you saw fit, what is that thing? What's it doing? And where's it going?
It's a loaded question. um, I think that there needs to be a little bit better communication from the carrier standpoints about what their vision is on their technology and how that's going to involve agencies. There's too much clutter. Agents, we know that the industry is slow to pivot to change. The carriers, the larger carriers, the ones that have been around for a long time, those are the ones that usually are the slowest to change. There has been a significant increase in speed as how they implement things and how they kind of view the way that business is done today. But you have these carriers go out there and put so much money into creating new systems just to launch that new system, and then that new system doesn't work half the day. It's super frustrating. I think that there needs to be a task force that makes sure that they're communicating between all the available options out there, and there's a handful of one that interact with each other on an everyday basis, and even those just don't work very well. So if I were to wave a magic wand, it'd probably to be to kind of have everybody get over their egos and sit down in a room and say, hey, how can we as a whole make this industry better and easier so we as a whole succeed?
Bogus, this has been fantastic. I'm going to leave it right there, sir.
Sounds good.